It's September 4th, 2010, 4:35 in the morning, dead asleep next to my now ex-wife in our house in Christchurch, New Zealand. The street was quiet. My rescue dog was at the end of the bed, snoring his head off. This was my new normal life. A boring life, but the good kind of boring. Then the whole house began to shudder. Just this instant full-volume explosion of sound and movement that ripped me right out of my sleep, and into a world where the floor wasn't flat anymore. The walls were moving like they were made of fabric. The power cut out mid-shake and the whole city just went black. I was on my feet before my brain caught up, stumbling across the room like a drunk on a boat. I was heading for the window on nothing but instinct. The sky was glowing. Looking across the city, every light was dead. The grid was gone, but the atmosphere above my house in particular was lit up like a low-hanging aurora. Greens and purples and those pale, sick whites rolling through the clouds, just hanging there, like the air itself was on fire. Marie screamed from the bed, "What's happening?" And my brain totally overloaded, grasping for literally anything that made sense. It defaulted to the only explanation available to a half-asleep man watching a light show during the end of the world. I turned around and said,
"I think it's aliens, babe."
It's funny now, but underneath the joke is something that's been eating away at me for 15 years. I know what I saw, and I have experienced quakes in Japan before. This was very different. The textbook answer is something called an earthquake light, or an EQL. When the tectonic plates grind hard enough, the friction generates massive electrical charges that ionize the oxygen in the atmosphere above. You get this temporary, glowing plasma. Scientists have documented it going back centuries. It's rare, but it's real. And for a long time that was good enough for me. Then, I hear the name Eric Hecker. Hecker wasn't a scientist. He grew up blue-collar, a plumber by trade and a firefighter by instinct. The kind of guy that walks in a room and immediately clocks the exits, the water mains, the load-bearing walls. He spent years working in the guts of buildings that everybody else ignores. Crawl spaces under hospitals, boiler rooms in schools. Hecker understood infrastructure the way a surgeon understands anatomy. He knew what was supposed to be there, and he knew when something wasn't. In 2010, he took a contract with Raytheon Polar Services to deploy the Musden Scott South Pole Station. And I need that to sit with you for a second. Raytheon. Not a university, not a national science foundation. The defense contractor that builds Tomahawk cruise missiles, Patriot air defense systems, and directed energy weapons for the United States military. This is the very same company that publicly demoed a truck-mounted microwave weapon in 2002. This weapon could make you feel like your skin was on fire from 500 meters away. That Raytheon, running the maintenance at a science station in Antarctica. Now, if you're wondering how a weapons manufacturer ends up staffing a research station at the bottom of the world, you need to understand how Antarctica really works. On December 1st, 1959, the nations of the world shook hands on what would become the most celebrated arms control agreement in history. 12 countries signed the Antarctic Treaty, locking away the most hostile continent on the planet. Total demilitarization, no military bases, no weapons testing. Antarctica was designated a pristine laboratory for pure, unadulterated science. The cameras flashed and the diplomats smiled. Everybody went home feeling good about humanity. But if you know how compartmentalization and black budget programs actually operate, you know that treaties of this magnitude aren't written to restrict power. They are written to hide it. What if the Antarctic Treaty wasn't about protecting the ice? What if it was about establishing the ultimate global sanctioned blind spot? A massive frozen fortress where the military-industrial complex could operate completely off-grid, free from public oversight and international law. Daniel Ellsberg, the guy who leaked the Pentagon Papers and spent the rest of his life paying for it, had a thing he used to say about classification. It doesn't protect national security. It protects the people making the decisions from ever having to answer for them. Now, Article 7 of the treaty guarantees the right of inspection. Sounds great. In over 60 years, it's been used a handful of times, always with advance notice, always on pre-approved routes. Not once has an inspector walked unannounced into a restricted sub-panel at a Musden Scott station. The treaty doesn't keep the military out. It keeps everyone else out. And here's the twist. Hecker had a skeleton key to the whole thing, because he was responsible for emergency systems across the entire station. He had unrestricted physical access to every door, every classified sub-panel, every guarded room buried in the ice. Scientists could lock their labs. It didn't matter. When a burst pipe or a fire alarm went off, Hecker walked right through. He later said that the researchers barely looked at him when he came in. To them, he was the invisible guy, just the plumber, the guy with the wrench. They had no idea he was reading everything on their desks. And what got under his skin was buried a mile beneath his feet. The IceCube Neutrino Observatory. It says it's a passive telescope over 5,000 basketball-sized glass spheres called Digital Optical Modules, or DOMs for short, frozen into a cubic kilometre of Antarctic ice. Their job officially is to sit in the dark and wait for a faint blue flash of light called a neutrino, a subatomic particle so small it can pass through the entire planet without bumping into anything. He had the clearance to dig into the technical documents that the visiting scientists never questioned, and what he found changed everything. Each of those 5,160 DOMs is rated to actively transmit at 2,047 volts. Every single one. When you wire 5,000 high-voltage transmitters together in a precise cubic kilometre phased array, you don't have a telescope anymore. You do have one of the largest directed energy systems ever built, something capable of channeling a massive amount of electromagnetic force into a coherent beam and firing it straight through the Earth's crust. He found something else too, deep in the station's electrical guts behind the heavy breaker panel that a maintenance guy like him knows better than anyone. He found a control system for an ELF transmitter. Officially, the Navy's ELF program was decommissioned in 2004. Shut down. Done. But the breaker at the South Pole was locked in the on position. Not just powered, locked. And then there's the timing. September 2010. It's the dead of the Antarctic winter. The station is sealed. No planes, no resupply, no way out. Perfect if you were running an operation no one was supposed to see. Hecker says that's when everything came online. The IceCube array, fully operational, the ELF system, already powered, locked, behind that breaker, and the generators pushing everything they had into the ice. Not up, down into the bedrock. The theory of the operation is almost disturbingly simple. You don't explode anything. You don't leave a trace. You transmit energy, focused, directed, driven deep into the Earth's crust, far beyond anything we could observe from the surface. And if that energy reaches a fault line, you don't break it, you tune it. Same principles as an opera singer shattering a glass. She finds the frequency, matches it, amplifies it, and eventually the structure tears itself apart. 2,500 miles away, I was asleep in bed, dreaming about, well, nothing. While in total darkness at the bottom of the world, a team of people were allegedly routing the entire power grid of the Musden Scott facility into a cubic kilometre of ice, generators screaming, every DOM powered up, the ELF antenna humming behind its locked breaker, and they aimed it all straight down. You have to understand what Christchurch was like back then. For somebody who had travelled the world, it was incredibly quiet, a ghost town. By 8 p.m, the streets were empty. The city wasn't just powered down. People retreated into the comfort of their own home, completely insulated from the rest of the world, the perfect unsuspecting target. Hecker calls September the baseline test, a calibration. They fire the array, measure the response, collect the data. A 7.1 magnitude event tears across Christchurch. The energy spreads out over the farmland. Open space, buildings crack, infrastructure buckles. But the dispersal saves us. Nobody dies. The scientists at the South Pole had their data point, but it wasn't enough. The problem with weaponizing nature is that the deniability cuts both ways. You trigger a quake that looks exactly like a natural event. But how do you prove to your own people that the billion-dollar project actually caused it? September was inconclusive, a muddy result. They got an event, but not a clean one. They needed pinpoint proof. A shallow, highly concentrated rupture directly under an urban centre. And to get that kind of precision, you don't hold back. You sync the entire array. You push every one of those 5,160 modules to full power. According to Hacker, this wasn't an accident. They looked at the September data, decided it wasn't sharp enough, and made a deliberate choice to push harder.
Hit Christchurch, New Zealand twice when they were trying to fire up this weapon for the first time. It was friendly fire, that the system is designed for that.
5 months since September, we'd rebuilt the business and we'd moved on. The cracks in the walls were plastered over, the insurance was kind of sorted, and the streets were full of people on their lunch breaks, ducking into cafes, checking their phones, doing all of the small, forgettable things that make up a normal Tuesday. Inside my business, everything went airborne. The building is built in 1935. It's not designed for earthquakes. Well, Christchurch wasn't known for it. Certainly not up until this point. When it stopped, the silence was suffocating. I walked out into the CBD, parts of the building still falling around, and the air was so thick with pulverized concrete, you could taste it. The Canterbury television building had just pancaked, trapping people in a burning collapse. The Pinegall Guinness building had folded into itself. They pulled bodies from the PGC wreckage for days. A close friend of mine worked in the CTV building. That morning, he wasn't there. His wife had called him home. Their marriage had been under strain, and things weren't good between them. But that day, for whatever reason, she asked him to come home, to be with her, to try and fix something that had been on the rocks for a while. So Malcolm left. Minutes later, the building came down. Malcolm should have been inside. 185 people died that afternoon, 115 of them in the CTV building alone. Students from Japan, China, the Philippines, Saudi Arabia, young people who had all come to Christchurch. They chose Christchurch because it was supposed to be the safest place on the planet, as far away from conflict as you could get. A city at the very bottom of the world. A Japanese student's mother flew from Osaka and stood out the cordon for 11 days, holding her daughter's photograph, waiting for news that was never going to come. A young Filipino woman had enrolled in the language course to qualify for a nursing visa. She wanted to bring her family over. She was 23 and only seeking a better life. And back at the South Pole, if Hacker is right, the telemetry screens lit up with a clean dataset. Hacker called it friendly fire. And the targeting logic is ice cold. If you're testing a weapon that triggers earthquakes, you cannot fire it at a geological stable enemy nation. A 7.1 quake in the middle of the Sahara, or along the coast of China, or in the Russian steppe, places with no active fault lines, would set off every intelligence alarm on the planet. Somebody would start looking at the source. But New Zealand? A nation known for being friendly, non-combative. A nation whose line is, maybe if I don't say anything, it will all sort itself out. Nobody sends an intelligence analyst to a natural disaster. They send Red Cross volunteers and search and rescue dogs. There are no missile casings, no radiation signatures, and no radar track. Just a devastated city. And Hacker's deployment window at the South Pole, his specific tour at the Amundsen Scott Station, lines up exactly with the most two destructive seismic events in modern New Zealand history. September 2010, February 2011, 2 strikes, 1 deployment, 1 contractor. Hacker's testimony didn't stop at the quakes. Hacker also documented the Atmospheric Research Observatory, or the ARO building, an unremarkable facility sitting inside a designated no-fly zone, The official reason for the restricted airspace is that jet exhaust would contaminate the atmospheric sensors. And if you ask about the massive green laser firing out of the building into the upper atmosphere, they'll tell you it's an atmospheric LiDAR, a standard weather instrument. Except Hecker saw what was actually powering that beam. Supercooled chemical fluids circulating through industrial-grade cooling systems. Now these were way too heavy-duty for a standard weather laser. He'd seen them before. You don't need a Ferrari engine to power a golf cart. The physics of a system like that point towards something far more advanced. And the directed energy platform doesn't end at the atmosphere. Hecker claims that some of the systems are capable of something called voice to skull, beaming electromagnetic pulses at a specific frequency to push audio or intrusive thoughts that connect straight to the documented neurological damage behind Havana syndrome. But that rabbit hole is so deep it deserves its own episode, and we'll get there. I spent 15 years processing the Christchurch quake as a natural disaster. You accept that the Earth is indifferent, that sometimes the ground just moves, and that the people who died were just at the wrong place at the wrong time. No one's fault, nothing to be angry at. There's a real peace in that framework. It's the only way to sleep at night after you've watched a city fall down. Hecker's testimony takes that peace and burns it. If he is right, and I want to be clear, I'm laying out his claims, not stamping them as proven fact. Then what happened to Christchurch wasn't the random cruelty of geology. It was a decision. Political, deliberate, calculated. A decision made by people with names and security clearances, performance reviews. The students in the CTV building didn't die because the Earth is cruel. They died because somebody needed a clean data point, just to justify the next round of funding. So here's the question I can't pull down. If you'd built the most powerful directed energy weapon on the planet, and you needed to hide it from everyone, every intelligence service, every journalist, every citizen on Earth, where would you build it? You would put it in one place. An international treaty guarantees nobody can independently inspect. You'd bury it a mile under the ice, stuff it with defense contractors dressed as support workers, and you'd call the whole thing Neutrino Telescope. And if you needed to test it, you would aim it at a friend who doesn't fight back, a friend like New Zealand. Because an enemy investigates, an enemy sends analysts and satellites, and starts asking very uncomfortable questions. But a small ally, an ally holds a memorial service, sends the funerals to prime time, and blames the unpredictable cruelty of geology. An ally does your cleanup for you. I buried friends. I stood in the dust of a city I once called home, tasting concrete in the back of my throat, being involved in rescue on the day, pulling bodies out of buildings, and I blamed it on the Earth. Because that's what you do. That's the only sane response when the ground betrays you. But I have to sit with the possibility, and let me be clear, it is not the certainty, and I mean it, but the possibility that the sky glowing above my house on September 4th, 2010, wasn't the atmospheric exhaust of two tectonic plates grinding together in the dark. It may have been the electromagnetic signature of a weapon being fired through the planet by people in a sealed station at the bottom of the world who knew exactly what it would do, and they watched the telemetry come back clean. 185 people, a line item on a classified spreadsheet. And the weapon, if it does exist, is still down there. It is still powered on, still locked behind a breaker that nobody is allowed to inspect. The only question is whose city is next. As Art Bell used to say, humanity deserves the truth. But are we truly ready to face what is truly buried at the South Pole? Until next time, keep your eyes open and stay vigilant. Thanks for joining me here today, and remember they rely on you forgetting, on you clicking away. Don't do it. Go deeper down the rabbit hole with this next video. And to make sure the signal can find you again, join the network, click subscribe here, and keep the light alive. This is Thinkavarium.